Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Great to have you here. Seeing a lot of interest into how to lead change in your bid team. So I'm just going to give everyone a minute to come in because there's sometimes always a little bit of confusion because people are like, is this on LinkedIn? Is it off? So we're just going to wait a minute. Who else here? I see some people. I see 15 mysterious people here. Where are you joining in from? I know we have people from all over joining, so just curious about who is here now. You can, I'll just say hi. This is where you can put in comments, ask us questions. Great. Max from the Netherlands. Ilse from Utrecht at T-Systems. Great. Hi, Leonie. Hi there. Isolde. Great. Michu, Chris, Mo. Great. Great, Leon. Thanks. Lots of our Dutch friends too. Oh, in Armenia. That's right. Yeah. In Sweden. Hi, Sophia. Great. Great to have all of you here. Great. I see more and more people are coming in now. Hi, everyone. We're just giving everyone a minute to come in and make sure they've gotten in to the studio so we can give you a nice webinar today. Hopefully lots of takeaways. Great. From Durham, North Hampshire, France, Berlin, UK, from Wigan. Great. Hi, Neil. That's fantastic. Rotterdam. Great. London, sort of. Deb Shepherd being mysterious. London, sort of. Okay, great. From Copenhagen. Lots of people from Rotterdam. Great. Oh, west of. I got you. Thanks, Deb. Thanks for clarifying. Great.
Great.
Okay. All right. Just a little bit of general housekeeping and just to introduce myself here as well for any of you that don't know me. I'm Heather. I'm Heather Melton. I work in go-to-market with Altura, and I host their international webinars and love doing it. And I'm here to just kind of facilitate everything for us to go through any questions you have. I'm going to keep track of those. So most likely we'll wait until the end for questions. But if there's something like clarification we're not following or something like that, Nigel said I could interrupt him, so I will, and make sure that we get that clarification. Also afterwards, you will get an email with a summary of what we've spoken about today, as well as a recording. So you'll also be having that as well. And yep, so that's what we'll be doing today. My job is to field those questions for you in the comments. So just go ahead and give me a shout out. You can also get in touch with me if you'd like. If you'd rather not put it as public, you can always reach out to me and send me a message on LinkedIn. Here's my LinkedIn. In case you're feeling shy, that's okay. And also just connect with me if you'd like. And I am also take the job very seriously. I will be Nigel's slide assistant. So I will be in charge of that as well. So now enough about me and about how we're going to do this today. Let's talk about Nigel Thacker. He is a seasoned bid expert with over 20 years of experience across FTSE 100s with private equity-backed firms and SMEs as well. So the whole gamut. And he helps them discover how to make a change initiative that sticks. He runs rebidding solutions. He mentors through APMP, and he recently launched My Bid Career, which is the home to the first management and leadership course for bidders. So we definitely have an expert here. You have a lot going on now, Nigel. So that's great. And I'm going to let you take it away. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. are we going to ask people about their
Oh, yeah, sure. I did. I
change
did have
experience?
questions. Thank you, Nigel. I need you here with me every time to remind me of things. Um, so one thing we wanted to ask, we were talking about this when we were preparing, and just kind of what kind of change have you been through? And let me preface that before we start going crazy in the chats. What kind of change have you been through in your bid team? So with organization or planning, tell me a little bit about the changes that you've had within your own teams. AI. Allard was saying AI. I imagine that could be something for quite a few of you. Right, moving into a RevOps team. Great, thanks, Deb. Implementation of a new bid process and implementation of a bid hub to support the process. Yep, that's a big one, isn't it? Interesting. Jared, key SMEs being made redundant. Making choices, Haroon, making choices based on data. Acquisition, a new bid response software, which includes AI and the team hates it. Okay. Right. Restructuring the bid, no bid process. Yeah, that's a big one as well. Seen a lot about new tooling, the amount of tenders and complexity. Organizational, centralized, dispersed, and vice versa. Cost reduction of bid management. These are great, you guys. Thanks for sharing this. Lots of changes for Andy. Moved from RevOps to marketing to growth team, and now I'm under pre-sales. Moving from product order a few years in sales, now moved into COO. Great. Merger of companies, new process. That's great. So this is all we were talking about with the changes you've been through in your bid team. So how about when you think about your product or what you sell, what change do you expect your customers to make when you go through this process? So not just your own process, but your customers have to make a change too, don't they? What changes do they have to make?
Maybe we'll pick that up as we go through.
Hmm.
Maybe.
Okay, fine, sure. Yeah, because I think that maybe as you talk, it'll get them thinking about that as well. Well, I'm going
Yeah.
to leave the screen but I'm back there. Internal clients have to self-serve and be more independent. Jane came in and said. Deb just hopes the customer doesn't notice. That's right. Um, My role has become more specialist, specifically aligned to public sector insurance tender. Although the organization has grown massively through acquisitions, tender function has become more siloed. Circular products, an increase of services. Our customers need to implement and adopt a complex new IT solution, usually very high impact. Great. I think this is great information. Thanks for sharing all of this. And Nigel's going to address some of these things while he's talking so he can help you out. Nigel looked at me like, maybe. Okay. All right. Thanks, Nigel. Thanks again. I'm going to leave you to it. Shall I share now the slides?
Yes, please. So, welcome everybody. As Heather said, I've got actually 30 years experience in bidding now. I'm getting quite old. But during that time, I've also had roles as managing director of businesses, as a change director, training development lead. So change has been something that I've experienced and implemented, not just in bidding, but also across a wider organisational context. So what I'm trying to do today through this presentation is really take some of that experience and apply it into our experiences as bidders, as Heather says, both as the impact we have on the customer, but also the impact of change and how to manage change within our own teams as well. Heather, can you move the slide along? Thank you. I think it's something that, with one exception that I hope somebody doesn't notice, is one thing that we may not think of ourselves as, but nearly every bid we do is actually advocating that the customer changes. So it might be changing to use our product, changing to use our service, picking us to do the work that they do. And that can be something that, depending on what we're actually bidding for, impacts a small number of people, or it might impact a large number of people as well. It might impact the customer's organization significantly. So what we're often doing in bids is we're putting in an implementation plan or a phasing plan as part of that bid. But do we really understand, as well as we potentially could, what change actually is and change management actually is? So that's one of the things that I'm hoping to bring into this session a little bit. But also in terms of change in our own organisation as well. There's lots of examples that people have come up with in terms of how change is either impacting them positively or negatively, how it's impacting their team, specific changes or changes that are more general, more slow, happening almost imperceptibly, but add up over a period of time. So change is something that we create in our customers through winning bids, but it's also something that impacts us in our teams and in our organisations as well. So I'm going to try and cover both of those aspects, if you like, as I go through a couple of processes and perspectives on change that we'll cover today. Heather, can you? Thank you. Now, change is something that has a huge background as a discipline. We're just getting there now with bidding in terms of having the APMP courses, books, those sort of things on bidding. But if you compare that with the background on change management, it's a much longer lived discipline. There's a lot more. I mean, if you could fill a shelf with books on bidding, you could fill a library on books on change. There's, in the UK, at least 6 universities that I know where you can do a degree or a master's degree in change management. None that I know that you can do anything on bidding. Lots and lots of people involved in change management jobs. So the body of knowledge for us to draw on as bidders in terms of change is huge. And I'm literally going to touch the surface of some small parts of it. But it's certainly something that we can use as bidders, but also use some of our own skills that we've got as bidders to link into some of the things I'm going to go through as well. But it's important for us to learn a little bit about change, because even experts on change say that 50 to 70% of change initiatives fail to meet their objectives. So if you think about putting AI software into your bid team, the statistics say there's a 50 to 70% chance that it's not going to meet the objectives if you're not actually implementing it, thinking through the best way to use change, best practice change management processes. Heather, we'll figure out my little message for you to change this as we go through. So I'm going to start with people aspects of change before I go through, if you like, a change management process, because nearly every change, if not every change, involves people. Um, it impacts people, people run it, um, and people are going to react to it differently, depending on what the change is, depending on their own personal view of that change. Um, and resistance to change can be one of the key things that's quoted as stopping change, actually delivering, failing change processes. So the first thing we're going to look at is people's reactions to change, how you can adapt to those, how you can think about those, how you can prepare for those. Um, and it's the same in our customer. So if you're thinking about your customer, um, will all as bidders or within capture or sales have done probably a quite comprehensive review of all the individual stakeholders within our customer prior to the bid. Are the influencers, are the decision makers? What are their needs? What are the key things that are most important to them? What's their attitude to us? How can we um, meet those needs, address those requirements, adapt what we're doing to fit, and get influence people to want to do what we want them to do, which is help us win. But if you think about it, most of those analyses effectively stop at the decision making point. So most of those analyses will be aimed at getting us to win and then stop. If you're thinking about change, certainly in your from your customer's perspective, actually winning the bid is the start of us impacting them on change. So one of the things that we'll look at is the different aspects of people as well, and certainly in your own organisation as well, the skills we've got in terms of thinking about stakeholders, individuals, needs, expectations, breaking that down, perhaps having a template where we've set it all out. We use that for customers. We might not use it internally when we're thinking about a change process. But certainly we can use those skills and those processes and those experiences to think about our own team, our own bosses, our own colleagues when we're planning a change process, and use that same sort of analysis to help us. Heather, next slide, please. And I guess just like when we're thinking about analysing our stakeholders in terms of a bid, we're looking at different perspectives that people will have. Some, in terms of a change process, the same way. Some will be optimistic about the change. Some might be apathetic about it. They just don't care. They don't think it's going to impact on them. Some might be skeptical, either that the change is needed or that it'll have an impact or what you're doing to make the change happen is the right thing. Some will just be plain resistant. So adapting our thinking, adapting how we work, adapting how we plan, adapting how we communicate to fit those different reactions that individuals might have. And they're not characteristics here. I'm not talking about someone who is generally optimistic, someone who is generally skeptical. Just like with the last slide, we're showing different reactions from the same person. An individual might react very differently to one type of change that they're experiencing to another type of change they're experiencing. So it's very much an individual, this person, this change analysis that we need to do. So I guess my first action point for us, if we're thinking about a change or we're reacting to a change, is to do what's called a change readiness assessment. Go through all the individuals that are going to be impacted by the change. Certainly, if we're doing it internally, we should know all those individuals who they are. Perhaps less so in the customer organisation, but maybe groupings. And then think about who is going to be pro, who's going to be negative, who isn't going to care, who's going to have questions, and work through how we're going to deal with that. Because if you do that analysis and find everybody is skeptical or resistant, you might need to step back and think again. If you've got a group of optimists, actually, can you get them involved in the change process, make them change champions or part of a leading group within the change process that you can actually use to help you drive that change through. Next slide, please. The other part of this, and I'm going to gallop through this a little bit. The other aspect from change management best practice to think about in terms of the people aspects of change is something called the change curve. Now, this is how people tend to react to a negative change, really. But again, different people might see different changes as negative or positive. But it's been researched, and there is a general pattern of how people react to change over a period of time, and how their reactions, their emotions change over a period during a change process. So the change curve is something that it's worth spending a short amount of time on. So think about that from an internal point of view. Maybe you've got a circumstance where you've lost a really significant rebid. So one of your most significant contracts perhaps has been lost, and there are going to be implications for not just the team working on the contract, but perhaps more widely in the organisation. If you think about it from that perspective internally, if you think about it from a customer perspective, it might not apply to the way everybody, the sort of things everybody's bidding here, but certainly part of my background is bidding for fairly large scale services in government, where people used to transfer from working for a local government or for a central government team, actually transfer into the winning organisation through TP regulations or the equivalent. And those people are going to be going through a very significant change from their perspective. So, Heather, if we can just go to the first reaction, if you like. I mean, typically what will happen is there'll be an initial reaction of shock, denial. I mean, if it's not as impactful a change, maybe surprise. But that will be an initial reaction that you should expect from a significant change. And reacting to that, being honest with people, building trust at the start of this process is an important reaction for us. Heather, the next typical reaction is people get angry, they get frustrated. Why is this happening? I lost rebid. Who's to blame? What happened? That sort of anger, frustration, perhaps resistance to the change can start to come out quite quickly. And recognizing people's feelings rather than denying them is an important part of reacting as people's emotions progress. Next one, Heather. Typically, then, what you'll find is people almost go into what's called a bargaining stage. Okay, so this change is happening, but can I reduce the impact on me? Can I negotiate it away from impacting on me? Someone's really against an AI system being brought into the team. Well, can I still carry on doing X? Can I carry on doing Y? Can we just use it for this? Can we hold off on using it for all bids or whatever? So there's sort of a bargaining process will often go on. People start getting distracted from their work, performance is going down, they're becoming disengaged perhaps, and your reaction at this point could be negative, it could be positive. Ideally, you want to actually listen to people and go, okay, some of these things that you're trying to get us to think about differently might actually be relevant, might be useful. We can change X, Y, and Z, but to make this change happen, we honestly can't change A, B, and C. It's still going to have to happen. Next slide, please, Heather. Sorry. The next stage is typically the low point for people. they might just be a bit annoyed if it's not a major change. If it is a major change, potentially they become depressed. They might leave at this point. This is the point where more people are likely to leave if there's a change going on that they're really not happy about. Um, and then this is the point where you need to watch for people leaving. You need to really be thinking about making sure you've got a supportive environment for them. I mean, if it is a significant change that's having a real impact on people, potentially even having counselling services being involved. If this is a major redundancy, for instance, is happening, um, pre-preparing all that because you know this stage is likely to come will allow you to minimise the impact at this stage. Next slide, Heather. But eventually, what you'll find is people do start to engage. People do start experimenting with this new reality. Maybe it's a new job role, maybe it's the new AI system, maybe it's the new organisation. If they've transferred to you, or if it's a result of your bid winning that's impacted on a change, people just start to think, okay, this is the new thing. Let me have a look at it. This is my new role. Let's see what I can do. What can I make of it? So performance will start to improve. You want to be encouraging that, showing people that change is good, the experimentation is good, innovation, experimenting with things is good. And then finally, next slide, Heather, you get to the stage where you're actually embedding the change. The change is starting to actually be accepted by people. It's the new reality. Maybe they see the benefits over the old situation, and they start to get on with things, and things move forward. So that's just a brief run through of a reaction process that often people will have. As I say, the wording in this version of it might not be shock, it might not be depression, it might be surprise and slightly unhappy. People can go through this very quickly, people can take time to go through it, they can get stuck in certain areas, they can even loop back to previous parts. But understanding that people are going to go through a set of stages of emotions when a change goes in can help us understand how we can react to those, how we can plan for them, how in your phase-in process, in your bid, you might be able to think about those emotions from, let's say, a customer staff perspective, if they're impacted, or something else. So you can add that level of understanding and thinking into your implementation processes when you're putting into a bid. Next slide, please. So we've covered the people aspects a little bit. We'll keep coming back to them because people are important. But I wanted to spend the rest of the session really on actually planning and managing a change process. Now, we're used to processes. We've got bid processes. We're used to planning for bids. We're used to getting ready for them. We're used to following the process. Well, change process can be quite similar to that sort of idea. So it's something we hopefully can relate to reasonably well. And we can think about here again, implementing an AI system, for instance, into your bid team as an example we can use here. But you can apply it to any change in your own organisation or in your customer as a result of your bid. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go through 8 different aspects or stages of thinking about a change, thinking about how you can implement a change effectively, what you can do during that process. But I guess the first point of it is you need to really identify that something actually needs to change. Now that might be obvious. a few years ago, we all went through this with COVID, for instance, just impacting our whole organisations, the whole of society, and most of us had to make pretty significant changes, whether it was leaving the office, changing the way we worked, um, changes within the organisation, customer changes, all those sort of things. They were pretty obvious. A change needs to happen, but sometimes it might not be so clear cut. If you're slowly getting more bids coming in, if your win rate is slowly declining, at what point do you recognise that a change needs to be made? So it might seem an obvious point, but you do need to have a point where you identify something needs to change. And then at the same point, it's, well, what actually needs to change? If I've identified a problem or an opportunity, what's the thing that's going to do that? So I saw from comments at the start, a couple of comments at the start. If you've got a change where, let's say, you've got too many bids, number of bids is increasing, you haven't got time to do all your bids, then obviously AI is sold as a solution for that. So that might be the change that resolves that problem. But in certain circumstances, it might not be. It might be we need to look at our bid no bid process so that it's stronger. We're changing it so that we're really only letting through really winnable bids. Maybe that's a different change that is going to solve the problem that you've got. So identifying what needs to change, whether this change is actually what you need to solve the problem or the opportunity, that's an important first point. Next slide. Then we get into preparing and planning for it. And often something that people don't do as much as they perhaps should. And certainly, if you read about change, definitely should do. But we're used to this. You rarely, ideally, best practice isn't go into a bid without having done any preparation, without having a plan for that bid, without having a process set in place that you're going to follow for that bid, without having done the pre-work on who's going to do it, what's our solution, who are the customers. We've spoken about that. But it's just the same for a change process. If you're going to implement a change, then is my camera gone on?
Yeah, I think you're back.
I'm back. Yay.
Yeah.
Okay. There you go. That was a change. Unplanned. So think about your change preparation process and put a plan together for it. So that would probably include, why do we need to change? Why is this the change we need? What's the end point that we're aiming for? What's going to be the situation once we've completed this change? How are we going to measure success? So let's think about the AI example. We've got too many bids coming in. Let's say AI is the solution to that, and that's the use case that you're implementing it because of. Okay, well, how many more bids is it actually going to allow you to do? At what change in your win rate is it going to maintain the win rate? What are those measures of success? But equally, what's your vision? So you can have numbers, but you need a vision for how things are going to work, so that you can communicate that through. We talked about a change readiness assessment already. That's part of it. Thinking more broadly about how that change might impact other people beyond the bid team, your IT team, your SMEs, others within the business. How is this change going to impact on them? How am I going to work with them? Having that step-by-step process for the change. What's the first step? What's the second step? What are we going to do next? What's going to happen next? What are the critical paths? What are the potential issues that we're going to have? What's actually going to be the the potential dependencies here. So having a proper plan for the change, but also thinking about what are the risks and challenges. So having a proper document that you put together prior to the change happening that allows you to think it through and communicate it as well is important. Next slide, please, Heather. Then pulling people together, getting people on board, rather than just throwing the change in there. One day we're going to do AI. It's pulled together a coalition for change. Now that might be thinking through who needs to sign it off, who needs to be supporting it, sponsoring it from a senior level, which of your team are going to be involved, who else is going to be involved, and working through how you'll actually get those people on board so that they're positively supporting the change. Maybe they're part of the governance process if it's a significant change, or an action team if not. But working through building that coalition for the change who are going to support it, be positive about it, because just going ahead without that clear coalition for change means that people might be confused. You might not have thought through the resistance that people are going to have, or the skepticism, and you won't be able to put that change in place as effectively. Next, obviously communicate change. Of the main reasons why changes fail, resistance to change by staff is one of the most serious reasons. The other one is a lack of communication about the change. So having a communication plan as part of your pre-planning work, not just the initial how we're going to do things, but a plan going through the whole change period and process, having a very clear plan about how you're going to communicate generally, specifically with individuals, how you're going to communicate at different stages, creating a sense of urgency about the change, but also how you're going to get feedback about the change, how you're going to deal with that feedback, how you're going to react to those different views, how you're going to adapt your communication as the change progresses. All those things are important to be thinking about and doing if this change is going to be successful. And again, this is where your vision and your clarity of why you're making this change come in, because that gives you the underpinnings for the communication. Why are we doing this change? Why is it important? Where are we going to get to, and what's it going to achieve? Are key important parts of that, as well as the ongoing communication. Next. And then thinking about how you can actually enable people to make the change, act on the change, work through the change as well. So enabling and supporting it. And that can be creating a general environment where you're supportive, but there's hard-nosed stuff around, well, what training are we going to give people to prepare for this? What coaching are we going to do? Mentoring. Are we going to have weekly team catch-ups to discuss progress on the change, or questions about the change, worries about the change? How are we going to actually enable this change to happen and support people through it? Planning that ahead, understanding it, checking whether, if you're in the middle of a change, whether you are actually enabling the change to happen, whether there are extra things you need to do are important parts of that as well. Just rushing through implementation, assuming people will keep up, is a great way to make the change not work. So going through that stage is part of your planning, and keeping up with that is a key part of it. And again, thinking about it from your customer perspective after you've won a bid. all these different parts of your change process, or what you write about your change process in your bid, will add to the credibility and hopefully the scores of that section of a bid, as well as help you make that implementation more effective. Next slide, please, Heather. Early wins. Planning early wins and recognizing early wins is a great way to start bringing people on board, helping them adapt. We go back to the change curve and think about the experimenting and acceptance timing or stage of the change curve. Getting those early wins, planning those early wins is an important part of helping the change to actually move forward. So, if we're thinking about AI, it might just be some of the milestones that you set. Yes, we've now got it into the system. Yes, the bid library is all in there. We've completed our first answer draft using it. Obviously, we've won our first bid that we use the AI system for. They're all things that you can create as early wins, or just recognise as early wins, and really push them, communicate them, celebrate them. But planning ahead for them is also part of a successful change process. And again, making sure that you're being adaptive as you go through, in case something happens you hadn't planned for that's positive. Communicating and celebrating that is an important part. Next, and then it's maintaining momentum. A lot of changes, particularly if you're going through a number of changes at the same time, a lot of changes can just be put in and then almost forgotten. But if you really want change to work, you've got to keep maintaining that momentum as people start to accept it, as it starts to make a difference, as it starts to look like it's going to work. Keep that momentum going. Keep thinking about how you can keep pushing, keep communicating. If your AI system has started to work now, what other things can you use it for? How can you gain other benefits from it? Just keep going through, because now is the point, if you lose touch, where those people that were perhaps resistant to the change but have sort of put their heads down and got through it, or those that were skeptical or even apathetic about it, now's the time where people might just sort of see that the focus is off and start to revert back to old ways, or non-positive practices might come in place. So keeping that momentum going, it's vital in doing this. And then finally, the next slide, just ongoing embedding that change into what you're doing. So let's think about it from an AI perspective. You've got your AI system, you've put it in, you've started using it, you've started winning bids from it. It's impacted now in terms of enabling you to do more bids, keeping your win rate going. That's great, but how do you embed that into your daily working and make that actually fit and embed into your system? So, how is it going to change how you recruit new team members, the type of skills you're looking for in recruitment? How's it going to impact the ongoing training or induction process for new people? How does it impact your personal development plans for individuals? Thinking through how you adapt to your process and change the culture potentially to fit what you have now changed, and make sure that embeds that change into your day-to-day work is, if you like, the final thing that makes sure the change will stick, and you'll have moved from one level of performance to another level of performance, and that's going to stay and move upwards rather than be a temporary up that then falls off again. So that's the process and the things to think about that if you like, comes from one aspect of change management best practice, bringing it into bidding, looking at that one application. But you can apply it to any change internally. You can use the whole process and go big on it. If it's a significant change, just as you would with a very big bid, you do one process. With a very small change, you might do process light. Once you get more used to this process, you might do a change light process. But the literature says, the case studies say, the research shows, if you don't at least understand and have some focus on each of these elements of a change, your chances of it embedding itself and working to the point where it meets your aims, it falls. It's like your win rate. Your change win rate will go down more the less best practice you use, just as in bidding. Your win rate will go up the better you are at bidding best practice processes. Your win rate might fall if you might have a lower win rate if you don't have a bid process, if you don't prepare for your bids. Exactly the same applies in change as well. Next slide, please. I think we're getting towards the end of it now. So I've covered quite a lot, I guess, in terms of running through a lot of slides. Hopefully, it's given you a bit of a view about a couple of aspects to think about from a change perspective, both inside your own organisation, but think about incorporating into your bidding and your implementation phasing plans, if you like, or wording around change and how you will enable it to happen within your customer as part of your bid win. I think the top line people is just don't forget about the people aspects. Do the pre-work just as we would with bidding, ideally. Preparing and planning for the change, as well as then being adaptive and reactive as you go through to adapt to the unexpected. But I've just touched the surface really of all the tools, processes, best practices, things that you can pick up from the body of knowledge, if you like, on change. So there's a lot more out there. There's a lot more that you can pick up on. There's a lot more detail in each of those areas you can go into through websites, books, just googling stuff. Obviously, there's a module on the management leadership course that I do that's on change that I've picked some of this stuff from as well. But hopefully, it gives you a bit of a view about some key things we can do if we want changes to be a success in our own bid team, and for our bids to be successful in terms of making the impact we say in our bids that they actually will. So I think my time is up, Heather. So if there's any questions.
Thanks for that, Nigel. That was great. Thank you. Any questions you guys have, go ahead and put that into the thanks for joining. She has to jump into a meeting, she was saying. Thanks for that. Any questions you have, just put them into the comments. I think there are not a lot of questions they have. I've had some that just from talking with people on LinkedIn about it, and a couple came in that way as well. If I can just take those for you. Some people made some comments along the way. Neil was saying this is great, that it's really resonating with him and dealing with change from a personal perspective and working to a more defined bid process. And I'd like to, Maurizio, check what the urgency to change is. And I think that's a big one as well. A question we have is, what's the best way to suggest changes to the bid process when you're still relatively new to the team?
I guess it's thinking about that process for yourself in terms of Well, if you think something needs to change, it's thinking about this process. Why do you think it needs to change? What problem is it going to solve? How is your solution going to solve that problem? What could happen? And then thinking about who is the best person or the best people to talk to about this first. It may be your boss. You might want to build a coalition of change amongst your colleagues,
I
your
love
more
that
experienced
coalition of
colleagues.
change.
Um,
Yeah.
and just thinking through how you can apply some of those things from change into this, rather than just flying in there going, "I've got a great idea. Why don't we do this?" It's think about each of those stages and think about why, what difference is it going to make, or the alternatives. How do I actually plan this ahead? How do I gain the best coalition for change? Thinking about the individuals you can address first, who will then perhaps hopefully support you or just give you some feedback to help
Hmm.
you either realize actually fine, not good, or adapt it before you then go to decision makers and things.
Hmm, great. And Jane, Bradshaw also said examples of when you've implemented similar change elsewhere is powerful. I think that as well is really, really great. So this is something that someone asked me about the other day from a post online when I was talking about our webinar and change management. And they were saying that it's a little bit, it's that, it's not like there's a perfect time for change sometimes. It's like you're always running flat out. So when you're always in delivery mode, when do you implement change? When do you know when the best time is for your team?
Well, I guess it depends on the source. I mean, as I say, when COVID came out, it wasn't like now we're busy, we'll do that next year. Um, that just wasn't possible. Um, and I think recognizing that change is needed, you can be that. What's that story about the frog in the boiling water? The frog slowly getting hotter and hotter and hotter, and not realizing. Um, so I think you can do that. I think it's being alive to problems. It's being alive to thinking about what the causes of those problems are, and being able to. And I know it's easier said than done. Being able to just take a step back sometimes and go, where are we? What's actually happening? Maybe it's a chance when you're having monthly meetings, just getting something there in your team meeting to step away from what's happening with the next bid, what's happening with this bid, whatever, and being able to step back a little bit. Or maybe it's doing a lost bid review or something like that, and actually going through that and saying, okay, well, what was the core reason for this? What do we need to do about it?
Yeah, and identifying those patterns maybe in those as well.
Yeah,
Neil has a
yeah,
question
using the
for
data.
us. Yeah. What would you advise in
Um,
situations where a hierarchical structure is in place, where you have the challenge to sell the change to your line manager first before it gets sold further up the chain? I'm thinking in terms of implementing an AI solution, but initial reaction is skeptical, and you have to show real proof points and ROI.
well, I think this is where that preparation aspect comes in, and thinking about what you actually need to prepare, and um, exactly your proof points,
Hmm.
and linking. I mean, I'm sure anybody that's putting AI, anybody that's trying to sell you AI, is going to have lots of case studies. They're going to have lots of examples that you can use to build your case. Um, and it's about, again, repeating myself perhaps slightly, it's thinking about who do you address first, and using as we would with a bid. If this was a bid and you were bidding this into a customer, um, what sort of analysis would you want to do? Who are the people that are pro it? Who are the people that are going to support it? Who are the people you need to persuade first? Who is networked with the key person you eventually need to get to and is going to influence them? can you get them on board first? So it's not just you going in there, it's actually they're influencing the decision maker first. It's taking what we do, and I think this is something we often don't do as bidders, is recognize the skills that we've got. We are, our job is influencing, our job is persuasion, our job is communication, our job is to get an organization to choose what we are proposing in a bid. But sometimes we don't use all those tools or recognize that we can use all those tools that we use within a bid in our own situation. So it's almost being able to step back and being as objective as you would be if you were putting a bid together and a bid plan together or a capture plan together, and thinking through how can I use exactly those same techniques, but apply them in my own organisation.
Yeah. And it's also, I think, really having a handle on your data, isn't it? Like those, like what Neil was saying, if you have, like, we went for X amount of tenders last year and we didn't get it because we didn't have that certificate and things, it's a much easier way to prove ROI. And then you can say, it
And
took me this
different
much
people,
time, didn't it, to get it together. So if I had that
yeah,
on the ready, then we wouldn't be in this position now, kind of
and
thing.
different people make decisions in different ways. Some of them are very data led, analytically
Mhm.
led. Some of them are more intuitive. Some of them, an example here, some of them are hierarchical in the way that they do things. Is your boss going to make a decision based on what they think their boss will think? So it's understanding how people's biases work when they're making decisions, or how groups of people's decision making processes work, and understanding what those are and how you can adapt your argument to fit. So if someone
Mhm.
is analytical and evidence based, get the evidence, get the analysis, put it in front of them. If they're more hierarchically based, well, you're selling it to them based on what will the advantages be to their boss,
Yeah.
from their perspective. If they're more risk averse, think about how you can reduce the risks of this. So it's really, as I say, it's using the skills we actually have and use every day in dealing with customers, but then applying them to the slightly more uncomfortable, um, subjective, internal perspective.
Yeah, great. Let's see what Maurizio is saying. 2 reasons to sell. We need to see the problem that is there or has arisen, or we have an ambition to do better, up the level of success. Explore this phase of not knowing and don't pose a solution. See what you need to do and leave and assess the situation. Data is nice, but people make decisions more with limbic system. Fear is nice to change. Great. Thanks, Maurizio. That's great. All righty.
Yeah,
Well,
and
this is,
you see that. Sorry, you see that with AI stuff. Some salesmen from AI are saying, everyone else has got it, so you're going to be the last one. Is that a good
yeah,
reason to change?
yeah. No, it's not always, is it?
Yeah.
You can't just leave. You can't sell on FOMO. And that's it. So, yeah, no, it's, you need if you're making a change, it needs to be a change that's worthwhile and that you're getting something out of. Completely agree. Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much, Nigel. Nigel and I've been talking about change and change management now for months over different conversations. So it's great, and it's great that you've set up a platform for people to learn about it as well, because it's something we've talked about a lot, that a lot of times managerial skills aren't really taught. So it's nice that it's a comforting thing to know that this is already things that are in your toolkit as bidders, and that it's something you can just apply internally. So thank you so much, Nigel. I appreciate you being here. Thanks. And I appreciate everyone that joined us live and everyone who watches this on replay. If you have any questions, make sure you reach out to Nigel. In the email, we'll send your contact details so people can get in touch with you. And yeah, and if you want to talk to us a little bit about AI and change within your organization, we can help you with that as well. And everyone have a great Tuesday. And I'll see you next time. Thanks, Nigel. Bye.
Thank you.